This episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Alex Ovechkin and his march towards being the all-time goal leader. We talk about who the Capitals will be targeting on the trade deadline, and then we talk about the Capitals as they prepare to take on the Canucks. We'll talk about all of that and more next on Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome in to this episode of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all platforms. Well, tonight we're going to talk about Alex Ovechkin and his march towards being the all-time goal leader. As it stands right now, he is tied with Jaromir Jagr, but we hope to push him past that so he can move towards passing Gordie Howe. And then we're going to talk about who the Capitals are going to be targeting on trade deadline. That is coming soon. And I think there's some big decisions for the Capitals to make, most notably in net. And then we'll talk about the Capitals as they prepare for the Canucks tonight. So, like I say, to start it off, we're going to talk about Alex Ovechkin and his march towards being the all-time goal leader. Alex Ovechkin has 766 goals as it stands right now. And as I said, he was tied with Jaromir Jagr. And then it's Gordie Howe with 801. And Wayne Gretzky, the great one, the GOAT of the NHL, has 894. I think it's within reach for Ovechkin to do this. I just think that, he's just going to really have to apply himself, and he's going to have to go out there and play Alex Ovechkin hockey as we know he can. And don't tell Ovechkin he's getting any older, because you would never know it. You know, a lot of players, as they get older, they lose a little bit of their touch. They're not as good. They're not as fast. It seems like Alex Ovechkin is aging like a fine wine and is actually getting better as he gets older. And I just think that part of that, it's kind of like with Tom Brady. There's just such an emphasis put on nutrition and fitness. And that's something that's out there that hasn't been there, in the older days. I heard Craig Laughlin talk about it, and he said that sometimes, guys would, and he was playing in AHL, they would smoke a cigarette and have a hot dog before they played a game. How much different times are now? Could you imagine if that happened? I can't do that. But talking about Ovechkin and his march towards being the all-time goal leader, and he's hoping that he can do it tonight against the Canucks. And Bruce Boudreau is kind of hoping that he won't, because as you know, or maybe you don't know, Alex Ovechkin likes to chirp Bruce Boudreau, his former bench boss. And this is an article that I read out there by John Sorensen. Alex Ovechkin was unable to score in Wednesday night's game against the Oilers in Edmonton. He needs just one more goal to officially pass Jaromir Jagr for third place on the NHL's all-time goal list. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention online today, but I saw a post from Jagr, or a Jaromir Jagr Twitter page, saying that, he is tied with me. Maybe I should come back so I can maintain, or I can get a few more goals to make it a bit more difficult. I'm paraphrasing it here. I would like to think that he's probably kidding, but if I know Jaromir Jagr, he just might do something like that. As you know, I believe he's still playing in Europe right now. I think he's the owner of a hockey team out there, if memory serves. And the guy's in phenomenal shape. So I could see it being a possibility. Do I think that's going to happen? I think that that's him just trying to chirp Alex Ovechkin a bit. Ovechkin's next chance to pass Jagr will come against his former bench coach, Bruce Boudreau, and the Vancouver Canucks on Friday night tonight. Boudreau met with the media following the Canucks' voluntary practice on Thursday, where he was asked about facing his former player on what could be potentially historic night. He says, "It's always fun. He gets his chances no matter what. When we played them in Washington, he had 2 great A's that Demko made incredible saves on. Last night, I thought he had 2 open nets for sure that he was going to score on, and he didn't score on them," said a smiling Bruce Boudreau. So it just seems like he's trying to kind of egg on Ovechkin. And I think that, those guys kind of have a bit of a history together. I know that he was his bench boss, but then there's also that video that circulates out there. And if you're a longtime Caps fan, you know the one I'm talking about, where he says, "You fat F word." So obviously those two have kind of been sandpaper personalities back and forth with each other for a long time. So I just think that that's kind of pushing that forward, that kind of just ribbing each other. He's going to get his looks. I've watched him for 17 years. No matter how good or bad he looks in the game, he's going to get opportunities to score. It's just the nature of Alex Ovechkin. Boudreau was hoping that it wouldn't come to this, and that Ovechkin would pass Jagr in last night's game against the Oilers. He says, I was really hoping he scored last night, let's put it that way, because he's going to look at me tomorrow and he's going to go, I'm going to score tonight. And he's going to do that. It's tough because he's one of the greatest players of all time. It's tough to stop one of the greatest players of all time. Boudreau and Ovechkin have met many times before, and Boudreau knows he'll hear from his former player during tomorrow night's pregame warm-up. And that's like kind of what I was talking about there. Those two, I think they have a history, and I think they have a respect for each other, but they like to chirp each other as friends do sometimes. That'll happen for sure. I can tell you, he'll come over between the benches and he'll look when he's squirting his water and he's going to look at me. I score tonight. I'll turn around and I won't acknowledge him because he knows it bugs me. That's the way it'll go. Boudreau was asked if he thought any possible negative crowd reaction related to Ovechkin and Russia's invasion of Ukraine will have an effect on Ovechkin's game Friday night. I don't think anything, once the game starts, has an impact on Alex. He'll play hard everywhere he goes. That's just the nature of him. And that's another one of those late night tilts on the West Coast for the Capitals playing the Canucks. Those are tough ones. Those are tough ones for the fans, especially if you live on the eastern part of the country. I live in the central time zone, and even for me, that's a 9 o'clock start. That is a difficult game to watch to completion because, by the time it's done, it's going to be it depends on where you live. So I'll go with Eastern time here. It'll be about 1 o'clock in the morning. That's getting to be pretty late to watch a game, but if you're hardy enough and you want to stay up for that, I think that you should do that because, like I say in this article here, it sounds like it could potentially happen that Ovechkin could surpass Jagr's record. And wouldn't that be great if he could do that tomorrow night as he plays Bruce Boudreau? I think that would be so satisfying just for him to go out there and chirp him like I know he will. So before we move on to the next segment here, after the break here, we're going to talk about what free agents, what players that the Capitals are going to be targeting on trade deadline. Some of them will be free agents, but most notably goaltenders. We'll talk about who those players will be after the break. But first, it's that time of year again, as college basketball tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Thank you, Bet Online. So in this part, we're going to talk about who the Capitals will be targeting. And like I say, I think it's no real secret there. The Capitals are going to be targeting a lot of goaltenders out there, or they're going to be kicking the tires on them, shall we say. Who are those goalies? Well, I'm going to go over them here with you. So most notably, there's the top 5 goalies to watch at the NHL trade deadline. This is in the hockey news, and it's pretty widely circulated. I heard Elliot Friedman talk about it in the game last night, as a matter of fact. So number 1, and this really shouldn't come as a surprise. I've talked about it in the podcast quite extensively, and it's a former hometown hero, Braden Holtby. He's currently with the Dallas Stars. Heading into the season, the Dallas Stars had 3 goalies. And I thought that was kind of weird last year when they picked up Holtby, but as it turns out, there was injuries and they needed that depth. Anyway, 3 goalies capable of starting NHL games, and we're also awaiting a 4th. 2-time All-Star Ben Bishop to return from injury. Flash forward to January, Bishop has retired, and Anton Khudobin is currently not playing anywhere after clearing waivers. The emergence of 2017 first-rounder Jake Ottinger and Dallas' position outside the playoffs could lead Holtby's being expendable in 2 months' time. Wouldn't that be something? Caps Nation, what do you think of that? Bringing Braden Holtby back to the district? I think that he holds a fond place in the Capitals' hearts, of course. But, is that something that ultimately the Capitals are going to want to do? Like I've said before, isn't that, kind of like going back to an old girlfriend? You kind of, you think you're going to make it work, but then you're like, oh, yeah, that was the problem with them. Despite a 7-8-1 record, Holtby has a solid 2.53 goals against average, .916 save percentage, and a 2.1 goals saved above expected. He is also affordable, earning only $2 million this season. And man, how times have changed. Remember, there was a time after the Capitals won the Stanley Cup that he could have commanded the Kings' ransom, and now he's not making nearly as much money. The 32-year-old Holtby won a Stanley Cup in 2018 and has a Vezina trophy to his name. He would be worth addition to any playoff contender in need of a starter or a 1B. And I got to be honest, that would be a pretty great tandem, wouldn't it? Vitek Vanacek and Braden Holtby. I think it's possible. I really do think it's possible. I think it's more likely than the guy I'm going to talk about here next, Marc-Andre Fleury, currently of the Chicago Blackhawks. And I talked about this in yesterday's podcast. I think that more than anything, Marc-Andre Fleury is a Penguin for life. And I think that he doesn't forget how things are, and he doesn't forget his hatred for the Capitals. And then, of course, you can't also forget about when he was on the Golden Knights, and then the Capitals ended up beating the Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup. I just think that there's a lot of animosity and frustration there. I don't think it's possible, and I think that if anything's going to happen, I could see Marc-Andre Fleury, he's kind of getting up there as far as, age as an NHL goaltender. I could see him making a return to Pittsburgh. I think it's possible. I think that might happen at some point, but one of the biggest questions in the hockey world, will Fleury be open to another move after being sent to Chicago this summer? The three-time Stanley Cup champion has a modified no-trade clause and is the last year of his contract. With the Blackhawks struggling to keep pace in the division, the 37-year-old Fleury has been one of the few bright spots, and he should have some control over where he goes if he decides he wants to chase another cup. And, I guess that remains to be seen, or I guess that depends on your opinion, if you think the Capitals are cup contenders. The reigning Vezina Trophy winner, Fleury, has a slow start to the season, but is up to a 13-11, 3-3 record with a 2.69 GAA and a .916 save percentage, but he has saved minus 2.3 goals above expected. A proven winner and a great personality, Fleury would be a fantastic option for any playoff team if they can make his $7 million contract work. So, wow, what a big difference between Braden Holtby and Marc-Andre Fleury. It sounds like you could get Braden Holtby on the cheap in comparison, $2 million versus $7 million. I'm not a math wizard, but that is some great savings. The next guy on the list here is Jonas Corpor of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And I think that he's a pretty good goalie, too. Every time we face the Blue Jackets, if he happens to be in net, I think he's done a solid job. After a couple seasons of sharing the net, it appears that Elvis Merzlikins has taken the #1 role in Columbus. Beginning next season, Merzlikins is locked into a new 5-year, $27 million deal, while Corpor becomes a free agent on July 1st. So I think they're probably thinking to themselves, how about we move along with that contract? They have Merzlikins in net, who's playing lights out as he always does. So I think that Corpor would be a great addition to any team. Would he be the one that I target for the Capitals? I think that based on who I'm covering right here, I would say I'd probably pass on Corpor. It has been long rumored that one of Columbus's goalies were on the block, but the team's position in the standings and the cost it would take to retain Corpor likely have him being shipped out in March. If Columbus does decide to trade the 27-year-old, they will be selling low, as he has had a tough start to the season, posting a 4-7 record with a 3.95 goals against average and a .882 save percentage across 14 appearances. A strong playoff showing in 1920, but never having started more than 35 games in a season. Korpisalo is a perfect insurance option for a contender. And that's one of the things I talked about. If you can upgrade, then do it. Is Korpisalo, is he an upgrade, or is he an upgrade over Ilya Samsonov? I'm not so sure on that. Like I say, based on the goalies that I'm talking about here, I would be a pass on him. So the next goalie I'm going to talk about is no stranger to the Capitals either. That is Simeon Varlamov. A phenomenal start from sophomore Ilya Sorokin seems to have landed Varlamov on the trade block as he recently emerged in trade rumors, being tied to the Oilers among others. And as we talked about in last night's pod, that the Oilers are in a market for a goaltender too. They will not accept anything but the playoffs, and I think that ultimately a Stanley Cup, there is zero room for failure on that Edmonton team. And the one thing I remember about Varlamov when he played with the Capitals, and just kind of following him when he's played with the Avalanche as well, is that he was a bit injury prone. And I know that a lot of times goaltenders can be, but if you remember Holtby, he was rarely injured. I just think that, with the different stretches and things like, and just keeping yourself in shape, I think it keeps most goalies in shape. I just think, if memory serves, Simeon Varlamov was a goaltender that was injured often. Varlamov is under contract for one more season after this with a $5 million salary and a modified no-trade clause. And then I don't know what Varlamov would think about coming back to the Caps. I don't think there was any bad blood there, and he is a Russian, and I know that he was friends with Ovechkin and Alex Semin at the time, so I think that there's a possibility that could happen. The Islanders are currently sitting last in the Metro Division. Can you believe that? Barry Trotz's team in last place, how far he has fallen, and have played the least number of games in the league, with 50 games to play in under 100 days to end their season. Their playoff odds seem increasingly unlikely. The 33-year-old has had a quietly good career with a win-loss record just under .500 and a career .916 save percentage. So I would say maybe on Simeon Varlamov. I have some pretty good memories with him playing on the Capitals, so it's definitely a possibility. But of all the goaltenders I've listed here, the next one I'm going to talk about is who I think the Capitals should circle on their list. And that's Alexander Gorgiev of the New York Rangers. That's another team that has some, they're kind of stacked in the goaltender department, and Gorgiev has kind of found his way out of a job, it sounds like, despite denying prior to the season that he had requested a trade. Gorgiev remains a prime trade candidate for the Rangers, as they have likely Vezina candidate Igor Shesterkin locked up through 24-25. The 25-year-old has 104 career starts across parts of 5 seasons, and with a solid .911 save percentage, and is considered to have starter's potential. Originally signed as an undrafted free agent, Gorgiev has a 7-5-2 record with a 2.71 goals against average and a .908 save percentage this season in New York. A free agent this summer, Gorgiev would be a good target for a team who sees him as part of their future and could extend him before July 1st. And like I say, I just watch Gorgiev play, and I remember the Capitals facing him throughout the last couple of years, and I thought he always played really well. So for him to be open and available, I think that, like I say, if I was Brian McClellan, I would circle Gorgiev on my list. I think that he would be a great addition, and I think that, Vanacek and Gorgiev would make a great tandem. The next one is a player that's played in the league a long time. And I don't know. I mean, we are the oldest team in the NHL last time I checked. And this guy isn't that young either. Jonathan Quick of the Los Angeles Kings. With the Kings currently in a playoff spot, Quick's future could depend on where the team is at 2 months from now. The 36-year-old has had a fantastic season so far, posting 11-10-4 record with a .914 save percentage. He is 6th among all goaltenders with a 13.8 goals saved above expected. Cal Peterson, the second half of the Kings tandem, has a 3-year, $15 million deal that kicks in next year, while Quick is due $5.8 million through 2022-23. It would be a surprise for the rebuilding Kings to spend so much on 2 goalies. and trade would give Quick another chance to chase a cup. And, he is a pretty solid goaltender, I got to say, but I don't know. I mean, like I say, I don't think that the Capitals should continue to keep going old here. And it just seems like if they go with Quick, that's what it would be. They would just be an old team playing with an old goaltender. And then, there's nothing against, having an older goaltender. But I just think that, I think the Capitals need to start thinking about going younger. That's the way the league's going, and I think that's the way the Capitals should go. I know that they have the youngest tandem in the league, or they did at least in the beginning of the season. So much changes throughout the season. I don't remember if they still do, but like I say, I just think that Gorgiev would be one to circle, and or Braden Holtby. I think that Marc-Andre Fleury would be a nice addition. I just don't see that happening. So after the break, I'm going to talk about the Capitals preparing for the Canucks. This is not the Canucks that you remember from earlier in the season. This is a team that is playing really well under Bruce Boudreau's control. And I don't know what it is about Bruce Boudreau. He really knows how to push those buttons or pull those strings or whatever thing you want to say. But he just has always had a hard time in the playoffs. So anyway, we will talk about that after the break. All right, welcome back to Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to stick with me today. And we're going to talk about in this part is Bruce Boudreau and just how he has done such a great job with the Canucks. The Canucks are extremely disappointing, but not lacking in raw talent. Boudreau's specialty, unlocking players' potential. And that's what he does. And I don't know how he does it, like I say, but he knows how to do it. Want to play a game? Let's try to identify two mystery NHL franchises. Team A sits last in its division, trailing even the new NHL expansion team, and holds the 28th best points percentage in the NHL at .360. Team B boasts a talent-rich lineup that includes 11 players selected in their first round of the NHL draft, including 5 drafted in-house. So Team A and B, of course, are one and the same. They're both the 21-22 Vancouver Canucks. Why the trick question? It's tended to illustrate just how wide the chasm is between what the Vancouver Canucks have accomplished in the past 2 nightmarish seasons and what they should be accomplishing based on the new raw skills they possess. How can a team with Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, Brock Besser, Bo Horvat, Nils Höglander, Connor Garland, JT Miller, and Thatcher Demko struggle so badly? And then they're going to go on and they're going to talk about what Bruce Boudreau has done to the team, how he has changed this team. And like I say, I think that what he does is he just has a great relationship with his players. Above and beyond everything else, he just has a great relationship with his players. And that is what's kind of propelled him and why teams are always seeking him out for his services. As you remember, like I say, the Canucks were a team that did not play very well in the beginning of the season, but under his command, they have done really well. The Canucks finally appear to be asking that question, making sweeping changes. They asked GM Jim Benning, assistant John Westbrod, head coach Travis Green, and assistant coach Nolan Baumgartner. And they were the question that they were asking when they picked him up is, what do they need to do to get this team over the hump? And part of that was picking up Bruce Boudreau. Like I say, he is a whisperer of the team, and he knows how to turn teams around. And I think that he is doing a pretty good job so far with the Canucks. In this article here, after a disastrous start to the season for the Vancouver Canucks, the team has improbably climbed the standings and now sits just 3 points behind Dallas for the final wildcard spot in the Western Conference. The Washington Capitals, on the other hand, hold a dominant 13-point lead over Columbus for the Eastern Conference second wildcard spot. Both teams were last in action on Wednesday night. The Canucks open a 7-game homestand with a 5-3 win over Montreal. And that's another team that's kind of firing on all cylinders, isn't it? After they picked up Marty St. Louis as the head coach. That's what I'm saying. It's just like, it's so baffling to me. In most cases, it's the same team. It's like plug and play. You put this person in and all of a sudden they respond to them. I'm not really sure why that is, but it seems to be working out there. While the Capitals fell 4-3 in overtime in Edmonton, Washington opened a -120 favorite to win on the NHL odds with a total of 6.0. So the Washington Capitals and the Vancouver Canucks, it should be a good one. And the Vancouver Canucks have a lot of scoring power out there. JT Miller's 4-point night led Vancouver to a third straight win on Wednesday. Miller collected a goal and 3 assists, while Travis Hamonic, Brock Besser, Peterson, and Bo Horvat rounded out the scoring for the Canucks. Thatcher Demko, who is in that tandem with Braden Holtby, made 22 saves in the win. Miller has collected 21 points on a 10-game point streak, and he now sits tied for 9th in the league scoring with 67 points. The Canucks' leading scorer has consistently been part of trade speculation, but whether he is moved or not will come down to if Vancouver thinks they are a legitimate playoff team. And, that's why I think that Braden Holtby moved on. I know he didn't have a lot to do with it, I'm sure, but Thatcher Demko is just a great goalie, and he is the number one in Vancouver. And I just don't think there was a lot of room for him. And for whatever reason, Holtby didn't flourish in that environment. Demko, who has won his last 6 starts, is expected to get the start again on Friday. The Canucks' number one goalie is 26-16-2 with a 2.64 goals against and a .917 save percentage. So, like I say, that is going to be an interesting game. And I think the Capitals are up for it. I think that, they're turning things around. And I think that, like I say, I think there's a pretty good chance that they could win that one. They just the keys to success for the game, if you're asking me, is to keep Tom Wilson on the top line. He's that snarl on the top line. He's that big body, but let's not forget his scoring potential. And then you have Vitek Vanacek in net. I'm not trying to diminish anything that Ilya Samsonov did. I think he played lights out, but consistency is what worries me about Ilya. So they got to put Vanacek in net. And you think, 2 things like that, I wouldn't tinker with the lineup, much more than that. I know that a lot of times the head coaches, they just never leave well enough alone. And they're like, I'm going to put this guy here and that guy there. Just kind of, like I say, leave well enough alone. Keep Wilson on that top line. Have Vanacek in net, and I think that just those 2 things will help the Caps win. And let's hope for a win. I really hope they do because, just that sour feeling of losing, I don't like that. And I think that, the Capitals chipping away at the standings, even though at this point they're kind of locked in at that wild card spot anyway, I just think that it would really help with morale and just help the team going forward. So that is the Locked On Capitals podcast for today. Now make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So I want to thank you again for joining me here on Locked On Capitals. And I will talk to you guys again next week. Thank you for listening.